I'm here from my own research institute called Global Observatory, Accurate Livestock Sciences. That's my calling card, but I'm talking to you on behalf of my 5 other colleagues who have been the co-initiators of the Dublin Declaration of Scientists. If you want to know more about Gold Sciences, you can get to goldsciences.org and you'll find all kinds of interesting visualization tools. That's my piece of advertisement for what I do. Here is the key message that I would like you to take home from this presentation. The reason why, as scientists, we need to look closer. So what is it that you see here? Probably a herd of horses going through a savanna. But if you look closer, you actually see that we're not seeing a group of horses, but we're seeing a bunch of zebras from top. All right? So this was the picture of the year of National Geographic. And so key lesson is things are typically not the way they look at first sight. And a lot of that happens when we go into livestock sciences. We see a lot of these things happening. And so, therefore, my colleagues and myself said, well, we need to bring together as many good scientists that we can find and bring them together in October 22 in Dublin, and then have this documented in Animal Frontiers in April 2023. And you all have that document here in your bag. And I was fortunate enough to work with almost 40 co-authors as a guest editor of this issue, where we were trying to pull together on all the different disciplines that are related to livestock sciences. So on nutrition, on ecology, on climate, on ethics, on economics, on research. So on all the different disciplines, pull together the best state of the art and write it down in such a way that a policymaker can actually read it and understand it. So that was the intention behind this document. And then, in addition to that, we launched the Dublin Declaration in that October 22. It's been signed by now by more than 1,100 scientists. And what is the purpose of this declaration? It's a one-page document. If you are a scientist, I encourage you to go to the website dublindeclaration.org and have a look. And if you can identify yourself with it, then please do sign it as well. As scientists, we need to provide the most reliable evidence on the nutrition and health benefits, on environmental sustainability, on socio-cultural, ethical, and economic values to the policy decision-making process. Livestock is too important for humanity to be left to ideas and concepts and ideologies and all kinds of other foundations for decision-making. So we need to provide the highest scientific standards. And the primary reason why we initiated this whole process, which is now the Dublin platform, because we felt that public policy making too often these days is not driven anymore by solid scientific evidence. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of that. So that's the reason behind having launched this. So one example of what I would consider not scientific evidence-based public policy decision-making is something that I just copy-pasted 2 days ago from Euronews. Denmark believes that maybe by taxing beef, it can tackle climate change. And on top of that was really nice coincidence that there was an advertisement by Singapore Airlines next to it. So you can stop eating beef, but you can take your long-distance flight to Bali instead, I suppose. So, I mean, we've just seen by the presentation of Brad Ridwit from Australia that there are many production systems for cattle. You could argue back and forth whether it's many or most production systems that are already climate neutral. But there are also production systems that are not. So just generally saying beef categorically is bad for the climate is just simply wrong, okay? And even if, and I say that as an economist, I'm an economist, even if there was issues about climate change in beef production systems, then taxing the beef would not be the right solution. And on top of that, it wouldn't be tackling climate change either. So just about everything about this policy is wrong. That's not to deny, that is not to deny that there are issues that as a livestock industry we need to deal with. We do have environmental sustainability issues that must be addressed. We do have animal welfare issues that must be addressed. We can be improving the nutritional profiles of the food that the industry supplies. So it's not like everything is fine, but animals will have to be part of the solution. They will be part of the solution. They are not the problem that you need to get rid of. Okay. So one example, one of the co-authors of the Dublin platform, Professor Alice Stanton, an incredible powerhouse in nutrition. She gave this presentation in Dublin on how much red meat is good for us and the importance of having transparent evidence-based health metrics about it. And in essence, I mean, this chart summarizes the entirety of the statistical knowledge that we have about health impacts and meat consumption. And on the, basically the x-axis says how much meat are you eating, and on the y-axis is the relative risk associated with it. And for most places in the world, with the exception of one study in North America, it's flat, okay? So there's, the essence of this chart is there is no significant statistical association. Meat is not a health hazard, is what the statistical evidence says. Very point blank and clear. Now, there are many scientists who have an opinion, who have an hypothesis about meat may be potentially incurring health risks. That's fine. You know, you can have an hypothesis. You can be pursuing for evidence, either causal evidence, association evidence, and so on. It's appropriate for scientists to have an opinion, but that's different from scientists having scientific evidence. So let's not confuse these two. Now, Alice and her colleagues, they looked at the global burden of disease study, and kind of the story, I'm going to keep it very short because it has become a bit of a legend in our circles. So she looked at global burden of disease, found out that suddenly there was a 36-fold higher estimate of death attributable to red meat, wrote a letter to the Lancet. That letter was ignored for the longest time. Eventually, the authors of the global burden of disease came back saying that the authors reply saying, yeah, well, actually, you're right, that was not correct what we did in global burden of disease, and in the next GBD, we're going to correct for that error. So that's good. You know, the self-correcting forces of science actually do work. So we are still in a place where we can critique our colleagues, have a scientific discourse, and result in an improvement of the statements. So that's one of the lines of investigation that the Dublin platform has been pursuing, spearheaded by Alice. We also had Professor Mann from Australia talking about the evolutionary role of meat, and I'm just, every time I listen to Neil, I'm again just surprised by how come we ever thought that plant-based nutrition can be healthy. You know, because we have roughly 2 million years of evolutionary history of being an animal, primarily animal-sourced, food-driven species. And when we switched that nutritional diet during the Neolithic Revolution, then we started to incur all sorts of health problems, and we have all kinds of evidence, evolutionary evidence, statistical evidence, that once you start withdrawing animal-sourced foods, you start incurring all kinds of health issues. But it's really can be fully explained by evolution. So Neil has been giving this presentation for the last 30 years, and it's still as current as ever, and cannot be repeated often enough. And so if you go on the website of Teagasc in Ireland, where we held the Dublin Summit, this presentation is available as a video there. Then switching topic to ecology, we had Pablo from Spain talking about the ecological aspects, and he started out talking about, well, I mean, what sort of ecosystems are we actually talking about when we talk about original ecology? And he quoted William Bond, who even in the way back already said there's a huge misunderstanding. The world's standard setting without human civilization is not green. That's the exception. It's typical, maybe in the tropical belt, for the world to be green. Normally, the world is brown or black or white, because the standard setting of savannas, which is kind of the largest biosphere that we would have without humans on it, is typically not green. For most of the year, it is actually some hue of brown or black, or if it's covered by snow, it's... So, and if you go through all of this, the end message of that is that the natural evolutionary, or the natural ecological state of the planet Earth, kind of for the last couple of million years, which is also our ecology as humanity, because that's when we've been around, is to have open savannas interrupted by a couple of trees, which would be kept open by ruminants, which need to be chased around by predators. Now, since we don't live very well together with lions and jaguars and tigers and wolves and so on, we humans need to be the predator. We have to be the predator chasing around the ruminants in order to preserve a healthy ecosystem. Now, do we do that enough? No, we don't. We're not practicing that knowledge that we have sufficiently. So clearly there has to be change happening. But the standard assumption that many green policies has that everything should be turned into a forest is just simply wrong. Forests are not the standard setting of the ecology that we used to have for the last couple of million years, which are the relevant time frames that we're talking about. So Pablo laid out that argument at length. Then we had Jason Roundtree from USA talking more about ruminants and sustainable grassland and how it all fits together. And then I want to highlight also here the contribution from Max Makovize from Zimbabwe. I've been personally to that farm, so I can personally attest to this. So this is a 60,000 hectare farm in Zimbabwe, on which they're currently keeping 6,000 heads of cattle, and they want to bring it back to 15,000 heads of cattle on that farm. But in parallel to those grazing and browsing cattle heads, they have wild herds of elephants. They have about 250 elephants wildly on that farm. They have roughly an odd 500 giraffes, thousands of antelopes and zebras and so on, all wild. So this wild herd of animals lives in complete coexistence with a relatively intensified grazing arrangement. And they actually even have predators on that land. So they have a couple of leopard families who are essentially keeping the wildlife under control. The reason why it works in Zimbabwe is because all these cattle are being supervised by herders, and then in the night they're being put into bomas, and then they cannot be attacked. This is not a system that we're going to implement in France, obviously, yeah? But this is just another example of we need to look closer when we talk about what are solutions. And it is perfectly possible in an African context to preserve wildlife, big megafauna wildlife, have a far more enhanced also bird life and soil health in this system, and at the same time conduct intensive animal agriculture. We also had Professor Moretti from Brazil talking about demystifying all kinds of misconceptions that we have about Brazilian agriculture. And then this is going to be a presentation that you will hear after this one. I just want to give you, stay awake until Wilhelm starts talking. So, and very important, we felt this was also, we need to talk about ethics. So Candace Croney from Purdue University gave us a lecture in ethics. And key message here is ethics is not about who is right and who is wrong. Ethics requires deliberation. Yeah? You need to talk with each other. If you go and say to somebody else who has a different ethical position, you're wrong, I'm right, you're already lost. Ethics is something very foundational to people. It's beliefs that they hold very dear. Ethical positions can be changed, but most of all, they need to be respected. So if you want to gain the trust of your communities, you need to talk with people on a respectful basis. Having said all that, in her deliberation and evaluation, she feels it is ethically absolutely defensible that human beings kill animals for the well-being of human beings. I want to briefly talk about this chart. Now, Professor Dr. Lelyfeld was not, I explicitly want to say, he was not part of the Dublin platform. He is not a co-author. But he's an atmospheric chemist at the University of Mainz, Max Planck Institute for Chemistry in Mainz in Germany. And what you see here is, if you go to the upper left, the one shows it best. This is the different speeds at which methane gets degraded in the atmosphere. So all the light yellow patches show that methane gets degraded within 2 to 4 years in the atmosphere. And the orange to red patches show that it gets degraded within 20 to 50 years, and orange and yellow patches that it takes 100 to 1,000 years. Now, why is this relevant? In all the climate change debate that we have, in all these debates about calculating LCAs and greenhouse gas emissions and, we always assume that methane has a certain lifetime, average lifetime in the atmosphere. Specifically, typically it's being held to be currently 12.6 years. So everything is always calculated with this 12.6 years. But if you look closer, like in atmospheric chemistry, like Professor Lelyfeld would do, if you look closer, you actually find out that different places in the world have different speeds at which methane gets destroyed. In other words, we need to have regional specific speeds of methane destructions which then obviously percolate through to different impacts of climate change, depending on in which location you actually emit that methane. That is something that is not even recognized in the IPCC deliberations yet, and it needs to go there. Okay, my final slide I want to quickly, in my 2 minutes of overtime, talk about. So what you see here is the costs of 10 grams of bioavailable protein in different kinds of foodstuffs across different areas in the world. So you see on the left side cattle meats, or your right side cattle meats and pig meats, they roughly cost 55 cent, US dollar cent, PPP adjusted, per 10 gram of bioavailable protein, all right? And then you see that poultry meats and eggs, they cost around between 20 and 30 US dollar cent. Now, all the way to the other end, you see that starchy staples, so all the grains and maize and potatoes, but potatoes doesn't matter, it's basically cereals. The cereals are at around 40 cent per bioavailable protein. So what does that mean? If I have a kilo of wheat and I want to nourish a population, if that population has enough calories on its plate, then my next question is, does it have enough proteins? Does it have enough micronutrients, right? So if these people have enough calories, what do I do with my additional kilo of wheat? And what I should be doing is I should be feeding it to my chicken and then eat the chicken or eat the egg of that chicken. So rather than eating the wheat yourself, if the deficiency is not calories, if the deficiency is micronutrients, then you should be feeding the grains to the animals. Because what the animals do is they take the low bioavailability of these micronutrients in their plants, turn that into high bioavailable food, and give you the micronutrients that you need. Now, so most people in the world have enough calories on their plate. As we heard earlier, where we don't, then it's usually the result of conflict. Conflict is not a problem that we can solve in this room. But where people have enough calories, they should be taking grains and feed it to animals. That's an economist speaking to you. All right. If you're not convinced, you can download on my webpage this document where all of that is being laid out in more detail. And I do want to quickly point you to my two colleagues out there at the poster session, Elna de Lange and Enrique Marais, who are happy to share their research results with you in the poster sessions. Thank you very much.